They told me not to worry, just to rest, just to trust the process. But when I opened my eyes after surgery, the first thing I saw wasn't a face I loved. It was a white ceiling, a stranger adjusting my IV, and a folded hospital bill on the side table with my name on it. Mary Johnson, patient responsible for full charges. I blinked slowly, the anesthesia still fogging up my thoughts. Outside the window, sunlight slid across the wall in pale streaks, sterile and indifferent. My throat was dry, and I tried to speak, but it came out in a hoarse rasp. The nurse, a young man with tight curls and tired eyes, leaned over me. "Good morning, Mrs. Johnson. How are you feeling?" I wanted to say, "Where's my daughter?" or, "Did anyone come?" But all I managed was a whisper. "The bill?" He glanced at it, clearly having hoped I wouldn't notice yet. "Oh, yes. There was some confusion about the insurance. Your daughter said you'd handle it." My daughter said that? The room tilted a little, not from pain, from the cold weight of that sentence. "They said they'd visit," I murmured. He didn't answer. Just adjusted my pillow and said he'd be back with some water. I watched him leave. I watched the clock tick. I watched nothing else, because there was nothing else. They said, "We'll visit right after, Grandma. Don't worry. Just rest." They'd kissed my forehead that morning, my daughter and my son, both in a rush but smiling. Angela had been checking her watch, said she had to get to work early, but would be back by noon. David, my son, had gripped my hand, promised he'd handle the paperwork, the insurance, the arrangements. "All you need to do is rest, Ma." I hadn't asked for much. I never did. Not when Angela needed help with her mortgage, or when David went through 2 divorces and still brought his laundry to my place. I laid in that bed and tried to feel something other than shame. It wasn't just about the bill, it was that I had believed them. Again. By noon, no one came. By 4, a hospital social worker knocked gently and asked if I had any family she could call. I gave her the numbers. She came back 20 minutes later with a polite smile and said, "They're not picking up, but maybe they're busy." It's still early. It wasn't early. It was never early when someone you love is recovering from surgery. I asked her to leave the curtain open. The hallway light made me feel less alone. At 6, the cafeteria sent up dinner. A rectangle of pale chicken, mashed potatoes with no salt, peas that looked like they'd been soaking in sadness. I ate 3 bites. Then I stared at the bill again, and I thought, maybe it's my fault. Maybe I made it too easy all these years. Maybe they think I'll always be there to understand, to forgive, to wait. But something shifted that evening. Not loudly, not like a door slamming shut. No. It was quieter than that, like the sound of a drawer closing slowly. Finally, I closed my eyes and thought about the last time either of them had asked how I was feeling, really feeling, and not just if I could babysit or loan a few $100s. I couldn't remember. When the nurse came to check my vitals at 9, I asked for a phone. I called my neighbor, Doris. She was surprised, said she thought the family was with me. I told her I'd explain later. Then I called my bank, and I asked a very specific question. When people say, family always comes through, they forget to mention the conditions. As I lay in that hospital bed, trying not to feel the pulse monitor as an accusation, I started remembering the tallies I never kept on paper, only in my chest, folded like old receipts. Angela had been 21 when her boyfriend left her with a newborn and a broken lease. I took her in, sold the silver set my mother gave me just to cover her rent. She promised it was temporary. That, just a few months, stretched into 3 years. I never asked her to pay for anything. I just cooked extra portions and slept light in case the baby cried. David had a different rhythm. He always came in with grand plans. Investment deals, music equipment. One time it was bee farming. I wrote him checks, not because I believed in the bees, but because I believed in him. Foolish? Maybe. But what else are mothers for? I thought love meant being needed. But in this small, two-white hospital room, with my name on the bill and my phone quiet as snow, I started to see it for what it was. They needed help, not me. The social worker returned in the morning, clipboard in hand. "Still no visitors?" she asked gently. I shook my head. "They'll come." It sounded weak, even to me. She offered to help with the insurance again. I said I'd made some calls. I didn't explain who I'd really called. Doris came by at noon with fresh clothes and a bag of crackers. She was all warmth and floral perfume. "Sweetie," she said, tucking the blanket around me, "you need to stop protecting them." I laughed. It was dry, like paper crumpling. "I'm not protecting them, Doris. I think I'm done." She gave me a look, not surprised, just sad. "Took you long enough." I knew she'd been watching for years. From across the street. When Angela wouldn't come, help rake the leaves. When David borrowed my car and left it with an empty tank and an overdue parking ticket. She never said much, but I could tell. People like Doris noticed the silences. I stayed 2 more nights. The nurses were kind but distracted. The food didn't improve. Angela didn't call. David didn't text. The day before I was discharged, the hospital administrator came in with paperwork. "It appears the guarantor form was never completed," she said. "We'll need confirmation that you are assuming responsibility for the charges." I signed, with a hand that didn't shake, because I knew what was next. That evening, I asked Doris to bring me the red folder from the cabinet above the fridge. She knew exactly which one. I'd labeled it for later. It held every check stub, every bank receipt. Down payment on Angela's townhouse, $40,000. David's 3rd rehab stint, $22,000. Grandchildren's camp fees, private tutors, re-roofing Angela's garage, bail money I never mentioned. I added it up, slowly, no exaggerations. 3D 12,760. That was the cost of being a good mother in my family. No interest, no thanks, and now, no visit. I sat with that number for a while, not bitterly, just calmly, like a woman reading her own autopsy report. Then I made another call, this time to a lawyer. The house felt different when I came back to it. Smaller, somehow. Not in size, but in spirit. Like it, too, had been waiting for someone to knock, and no one ever did. Doris dropped me off and insisted on walking me to the door. "You sure you'll be okay?" she asked, eyeing the steps. I nodded. The worst part already happened. She squeezed my hand and left without more questions. That's what I loved about Doris. She knew when not to ask. Inside, everything was where I'd left it. The blanket folded neatly over the arm of the couch. The row of picture frames dusted and upright. Angela's family, David's graduation, the grandkids at the lake. I walked past them. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't unpack. I just sat at the table, my hands resting flat, and waited for my own voice to settle. By 6, the house was still silent. No knock at the door, no headlights in the driveway, no apology. At 6:17, I called Angela, straight to voicemail. At 6:25, I tried David. The phone rang once, then cut. I didn't leave a message. I didn't need to. Instead, I opened the drawer where I kept my rainy day notebook, the one I used to jot down things that needed fixing, a flickering light bulb, a stubborn cabinet hinge. This time, I started a different list. Things I won't ignore anymore. I wrote the date. Then, the time Angela rolled her eyes when I asked for help with the Christmas dinner. The way David laughed when I forgot my PIN number last year. The silence after my surgery. The bill with my name. The list wasn't long yet, but it was heavy. Because once I started writing, I couldn't stop seeing. The next morning, I made tea and sat in the kitchen window. Watched as the neighbor kids biked past. One of them waved. I smiled, though it felt distant. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Angela. "Hey, Mom, just saw your missed call. Everything okay? Been slammed with work, sorry. We'll call later." It was 10:12 a.m. No mention of the surgery. No, "How are you?" No visit. No flowers. I didn't reply. An hour later, David sent a GIF. A cat waving from under a blanket. "Hope recovery's going smooth. Talk soon." Talk soon. I closed the phone and went to the hallway closet. I pulled down the shoebox where I kept the old bank receipts, every check stub with their names. I stacked them next to the red folder. Then I called the lawyer again. "Yes," I said. "I want to move forward with the trust, and I'd like to revise the power of attorney and the will." He hesitated. "Do you have someone in mind for executor?" I did. Her name had been in my heart all week. "Samantha," I said. "My granddaughter. She's the only one who visits without asking for anything." He said he'd prepare the papers. After the call, I stared at the kitchen wall for a long time. This time, they'd gone too far. This time, I wasn't going to wait for them to feel sorry. This time, I was going to take everything I'd given and start giving it somewhere it mattered. The hospital bill came 3 days after I was discharged. A thick envelope, crisp white, addressed to me in careful type. I knew what was inside. Still, my hands trembled when I opened it. 46,830. 1 surgery, 3 nights, no insurance coverage, no cosigner. I read the statement line by line, like scripture. Operating room fee, anesthesia, recovery room, medications. Self-pay in neat, impersonal print next to every item. I let the paper sit on the table while I made myself a cup of tea. 1 sugar, no milk. The cup rattled faintly in the saucer as I sat back down. $46,000. I didn't even remember saying yes to half of it. Probably because I'd been under. They said they'd handle it. Angela had waved her hand when I brought up insurance forms before the surgery. "Don't worry, Mom, we've got it." David had promised too. "You raised us. The least we can do is cover this." The least. I picked up the phone and called the hospital's billing department. The woman who answered was kind, but her voice was firm. "Yes, ma'am. Your daughter provided your name as the responsible party." Unfortunately, she didn't sign the final form. That leaves the account under your name by default. My voice caught in my throat. "So, I'm responsible for all of it." "Yes, unless the guarantor provides new documentation or unless we pursue financial assistance." "Has anyone called?" I asked. "Anyone from my family since discharge?" She paused. "No, ma'am. Not as of today." "Thank you," I said, and hung up. I sat for a long time in silence, the kind that hums in your ears when the world has gone quiet. Then I reached for the yellow notepad beside the phone and wrote 1 word in bold, careful strokes. Enough. The next call was to my financial advisor, a woman named Carla. She had a calm, soothing voice, the kind you learn to trust because it never rushes. "I'd like to liquidate the CD," I said, "and I want to transfer funds to a new beneficiary account." She asked the usual questions. Was I sure? Was there a trigger event? "Yes," I said. "It's time I started doing things for people who show up." Later that afternoon, I wrote a check. Not to the hospital, not yet. To Samantha. I wrote a short letter to go with it. Nothing dramatic. Just, "In case no one's told you lately, thank you for calling. for asking how I feel, for bringing soup, even when it was just a Tuesday. This is for your future. Use it well. I sealed it, addressed it, and walked slowly to the mailbox. My legs were stiff. The air was heavy. But something inside me was lighter than it had been in years. Back inside, I found myself staring at the family photos again. Angela in her lawyer's blazer, beaming. David holding a fishing pole next to the twins. Samantha's high school graduation, where I was the only one clapping loud enough to embarrass her. I took the photos down, one by one, wrapped them gently, placed them in a box labeled Archive. Not out of anger, out of clarity. Because if they wouldn't come to my hospital bed, they didn't need to sit on my mantelpiece. It was Samantha who called first. Grandma? Her voice was soft, uncertain. I just got your letter. Are you okay? I closed my eyes for a second. Her voice always did something to me, like warm cloth on a bruise. I'm better now, I said. Thanks for asking. There was a pause. Is it true? About the surgery? The bill? It's all true, sweetheart. She exhaled sharply. I had no idea. Dad said everything was handled. I let that settle between us. Handled, I repeated. He's good at that word. Another pause, then, I'm so sorry, Grandma. I don't know what they're thinking. They're not thinking, I said. At least not about me. She was quiet for a moment. Then, that check. It's too much. I can't accept it. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. It's not a gift. It's a correction. Still. No still, I said gently. You're the only one who ever came without taking. I heard her sniffle just once. Thank you. Spend it well, I said, and keep it quiet for now. She understood. She always did. That night, I sat with my checkbook and a new notepad. On the top, I wrote, Undoing. It was time to go back through the things I'd signed. Angela's car loan, co-signed in 2019. I'd forgotten. She hadn't. David's second mortgage? In my name, apparently. He had said it was temporary. I'd believed him. I made a list of every account, every card, every automatic withdrawal, every open gate. By morning, I had pages of them. Monthly payments for David's cable, Angela's gym, a family streaming service I'd never used. I'd been paying for Netflix, but couldn't get a single visit on Christmas. I called my bank, asked to speak with someone in senior services. This is Mary Johnson, I said, steady as stone. I'd like to cancel every recurring transfer except utilities, and I'd like to remove both my children from all financial permissions. The woman on the line hesitated. Mrs. Johnson, that's a substantial set of changes. May I ask what prompted them? I didn't flinch. Clarity. She was quiet for a moment, then said, Understood. We'll begin immediately. Some may take 48 hours to finalize. That's fine, I said, but I'd like a confirmation by email. Everything in writing. Of course. I hung up and sat back in my chair. 47 years of motherhood. 3 decades of quiet help. 2 children who had memorized my generosity but forgotten my presence. It wasn't rage I felt. It was grief. But not the kind that makes you cry. The kind that sets you free. The walk from the mailbox back to the house felt longer than usual. I wasn't recovering well, not physically, not emotionally. The stitches tugged if I moved too fast, and my chest ached in ways that had nothing to do with the scalpel. But the pain didn't bother me anymore. Pain was honest. What stung was the silence. No call from Angela, no knock from David, not even a text to ask how I was holding up, or whether I needed milk or bread or a bit of company. I boiled eggs for dinner, toasted 2 slices of rye. It was the first meal I'd cooked since coming home. No one had brought soup or asked if I needed groceries. I'd always been the one with casseroles and apple pies when someone got sick. I'd stood in kitchens for hours. Now I ate alone in silence, the ticking clock louder than the chewing. After dinner, I finally opened the box of hospital papers. A yellow slip fluttered loose from the stack. A feedback survey. How was your family support during your stay? I smiled bitterly and wrote one word in the margin: absent. I tucked the bill back into the folder and turned to the drawer where I kept older documents. Tax returns. Angela's tuition agreements. The car title with both our names. The lease I'd co-signed for David after his second divorce. They'd both come crying for help at different times. I'd always been the one person who never said no. And yet, here I was, recovering from surgery, eating eggs alone, watching dusk creep over my porch while my children lived just 10 and 12 miles away. I hadn't turned on the porch light in 3 nights. Not out of forgetfulness. Out of hope. Hope that someone might ring the bell anyway. See if I was up. No one did. The next morning I got dressed properly for the first time. Real slacks, a blouse that needed ironing. I sat in the living room with a notepad in my lap, waiting for the phone to ring. It didn't. So I called Angela. She picked up after 2 rings. Hey, Mom. Too cheerful, too loud. Hi, sweetheart, I said. There was background noise, traffic maybe, or wind. I was just thinking of you. Were you? A pause. Well, yeah. How are you feeling? Getting back on your feet? I'm managing, I said. The hospital sent the bill. Oh? She didn't ask about the amount. Didn't ask if I was all right. That's weird. David said he was handling it. I see. Another pause. Then, did you need something, Mom? I stared at the window. No, Angela. I just wanted to hear your voice. She laughed lightly. Well, here I am. Listen, I'm actually in between meetings right now, but I'll call you later, okay? Of course. I hung up. She didn't call back that day, or the next. On Friday morning, I looked at the front lawn. The grass was too high. David used to mow it for me, back when he needed gas money. Since I stopped giving it, the mower might as well have disappeared. I walked out with a pair of gloves and started pulling weeds. It hurt to bend, but I did it anyway. By the time Doris came by, I was kneeling on the ground, muddy and flushed. Mary, she cried, rushing over. What on earth are you doing? Making it harder for them to pretend I'm helpless, I said. She didn't laugh. Instead, she sat next to me on the step and said, They're not going to change. I know, I whispered, and I meant it. On Sunday morning, I opened the curtains and stared out at the street. Maple Drive was quiet, as it always was. Neighbors clipped hedges, dogs trotted on leashes, sprinklers spun across yellowing lawns. I watched for signs of life from Angela or David. Nothing. Not even a drive-by. They weren't coming. Not with soup. Not with flowers. Not with apologies. I had spent decades telling myself that family was about forgiveness. That maybe they didn't call because they were busy. That maybe they didn't visit because they thought I was strong. That maybe they didn't mean to forget. But now, in the still air of my recovery, I had no excuses left to feed myself. They had forgotten because they could. Because I'd made it too easy. Because I'd covered the hospital bills, the tuition, the babysitting, the moving vans, the gas, the groceries. Always quietly. Always without asking for thanks. They'd learned to see my silence as bottomless, a well they could draw from endlessly, until the well started whispering back. No more. By Monday, the documents were ready. Carla at the bank had arranged for all recurring payments to be canceled. Angela's car insurance, David's phone bill, the gym subscription, the lawn service, the family Netflix. I didn't even know half the passwords. It was all gone now. Erased. I stood in the kitchen and deleted the saved payment logins from my browser one by one. Each click was like a tiny exhale. Then I sat down at the table with the stack of legal papers. The lawyer had done his job swiftly. Trust documents, a new will, all signed, all neat. Samantha was listed as sole beneficiary and trustee. Angela and David's names appeared only in footnotes, removed due to extended non-involvement in care and support. It felt clinical, distant, perfect. At noon, the doorbell rang. I knew that knock. Too hard, too fast. David. I didn't move at first. I stood still in the hallway, letting the moment settle. Then I opened the door. He looked tired, disheveled, like someone who had just woken up from a long nap into a fire. "Mom," he said. No smile. "I've been calling." I saw. I thought something happened. Samantha told me about the letter. I waited. He rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous tic from childhood. "We didn't mean to leave you alone at the hospital. There was a mix-up." "You told them I'd pay," I said. "That's not what I—" "They showed me the forms. Your handwriting." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I stepped back from the door. "You want to come in?" He hesitated. "Yeah." He followed me to the kitchen, sat at the table where he'd once eaten 5 slices of my peach pie in a row when he was 12. He looked at the placemat like it had betrayed him. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "For which part?" I asked. "For the bill? For not calling? For pretending I don't exist unless you need something?" I messed up. "Yes," I said. "You did. I want to fix it." I nodded. "Then start by understanding that you won't be getting any more help from me." He blinked. "Wait, what?" "I've changed the documents, the accounts, the house, everything." "Mom, you can't be serious? After all these years?" "Exactly after all these years." His face flushed red. "So you're cutting me off?" "I'm setting myself free." He stood abruptly. "This is crazy. What, you're punishing us now?" I stood too, calm, firm. "No, David. I'm finally protecting myself." David didn't say goodbye when he left. He just stormed out, the door left slightly ajar, like he couldn't be bothered to close it. I didn't move until I heard his car peel away from the curb. Only then did I shut the door. Firmly, without shaking. That evening, Angela called. I let it go to voicemail. Then she called again, and again. By the 4th call, I picked up. "I assume David told you," I said, before she could speak. "Mom," she exhaled, her voice tight. "What are you doing?" "I'm reorganizing my life." "You're cutting us out." "No," I said. "You cut me out. I'm just acknowledging it." "That's not fair." "What isn't fair, Angela? That I woke up from surgery alone? That the hospital billed me because you listed me as the responsible party? Or that I spent my first days home pulling weeds because no one brought milk or asked how I was healing?" She was quiet. "Was it hard?" I asked. "To not call? To not care?" "That's not how it was," she said, but her voice was quieter now. "I assumed David was handling things." "Of course you did." Another silence. Then, with a little more edge. "So, what now?" "You're leaving everything to Samantha?" "She shows up. She's a child. She's kind." Angela scoffed, as if that were beside the point. "Do you have any idea what you're doing? What message you're sending?" "I do," I said calmly. "For the first time in my life, I do." Angela fell silent again. Then, "You're choosing her over us." "I'm choosing myself." and I ended the call. I didn't cry afterward. I didn't pace the kitchen or replay the conversation in my head. I simply sat, quietly, with the weight of what I had said and done. I had expected to feel guilt. Some part of me, deep and maternal, still wanted to reach for them, to soften the blow, to say, "This doesn't mean I don't love you." But I had said that with casseroles, with checks, with silence. Now I needed something else. That night, I went through old boxes, not the ones with receipts and bank records, but the ones I hadn't touched in years. Photos, letters, handmade cards from when they were little, Angela's clumsy crayon drawings, David's lopsided "World's Best Mom" mug chipped on the handle. I kept a few things, put the rest in a donation box. The next day, Samantha came by without warning. She had groceries, and she looked nervous. "I wasn't sure if you'd be up for company," she said, "but I brought blueberries. Thought we could bake." I smiled and opened the door wider. "Come in." We baked quietly. She mixed while I measured. The house smelled warm again. As the pie baked, she turned to me. "Dad's furious." "I know. He says you've lost perspective." I nodded. "Let him think that." She hesitated, then asked, "Do you feel okay about everything?" I thought for a moment. "No," I said. "I feel like a woman who's finally stopped being a floor mat." Samantha laughed, then quickly covered her mouth. "Sorry." "Don't be," I said. "It feels good to hear someone laugh in this house." We sat down with tea and still warm pie. She didn't ask me for anything. She didn't talk about money or inheritance or bills. She asked if I wanted to go to the park next week. That was all. And I said yes. After Samantha left, the house stayed full, not with noise, but with something better. Her presence lingered in the pie crumbs on the counter, in the clean mug she'd rinsed without being asked, in the scent of blueberries still curling through the air like a ribbon I didn't want to untie. It had been so long since anyone had left behind something gentle. I washed the dishes slowly, savoring the silence, the stillness. I used to hate the quiet. It reminded me of waiting for phone calls, for someone to knock, for the sound of keys in the door. Now it felt like ownership, the kind of peace you get to keep when you stop asking to be chosen. In the evening, I pulled out another box, this one heavier, full of papers I hadn't looked at since before George died. Wills, property records, a stack of old birthday cards, some from people I couldn't even remember now. At the bottom was a folder marked in my handwriting. Angela's college. I opened it. There were payment receipts, loan documents, a scholarship rejection letter she hadn't told me about until I found her crying in the laundry room at 18. I had taken a second job cleaning offices in the evenings to cover what the scholarship didn't. She never asked how I managed it, just hugged me and called me her miracle mom. I'd believed her. There was a printout of David's first business plan, too, the one about custom furniture. He'd promised to pay me back within the year. That was 24 years ago. Now the only wood he touched was when he leaned on my dining table to ask for more money. It wasn't bitterness that settled over me that night. It was understanding. I had done what mothers do. I had helped, sacrificed, stayed up late, said yes. But I had also let them think I didn't need anything in return, not even kindness. And that had been my mistake. The next morning, I walked to the park alone. My legs ached by the third block, but I kept going. I needed air. I needed space. I sat on a bench and watched as other women my age walked in pairs, chatting softly. Some held coffee cups. Some pushed strollers for young grandchildren. I wondered for a moment what it would have been like to have that. Not just a role in someone's life, but a place. Then I heard a familiar voice. Grandma? Samantha stood near the path holding 2 cups. I figured I'd find you here. She sat beside me and handed over the tea. No cream, just the way I liked it. How's your morning? She asked. Better now, I said. She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. I didn't know if I should bring this. It was a letter from Angela. I took it, held it in my lap. I haven't opened it, Samantha said. She asked me to pass it along. I didn't open it right away. I watched a squirrel dash across the path. I felt the paper between my fingers. Then I tore it open. Inside, her handwriting was still the same. Looping. Careful. Mom, I don't know what to say. I guess I've been hiding behind busyness for years. I told myself you were strong, that you didn't need anything. But the truth is, I just didn't want to feel guilty. That's on me. There was no apology. Not really. Just a string of regrets without form. I folded it neatly and put it back in the envelope. Are you okay? Samantha asked. I'm getting there, I said. She smiled and nudged my shoulder. One step at a time. We sat in the sun for a long while. No more letters. No more questions. Just the comfort of a girl who never forgot how to show up. And a woman who was learning to finally receive it. The bank smelled the same as always. Carpet cleaner and printer ink. But this time, I walked in differently. Not as someone about to beg for help understanding her own finances. Not as someone co-signing something she didn't read. This time, I came in as the only person I knew who'd paid every bill, loaned every dollar, and still got left behind in a hospital room without a single visitor. Carla met me with that calm professionalism she always had. She stood to shake my hand, but there was a different kind of respect in her eyes now. She'd seen the transfers, the canceled permissions. She knew I wasn't just here to make a fuss. I was here to finish something. We sat in her small office with its motivational posters about retirement and compound interest. She offered me water. I declined. I've reviewed the updates, she said, sliding a folder toward me. The recurring transfers have been halted. Angela and David have no remaining access or view rights. All linked cards have been terminated. I nodded. Good. There's one remaining account tied to the property tax on the house. It's still under the family trust you set up with your husband years ago. If you're changing that, we'll need to dissolve and reissue it in your name. I stared at the paper. This house. The one George and I had bought when the kids were 5 and 7. The one we painted ourselves, room by room. The one where I'd cooked, cleaned, worked double shifts, and buried 2 dogs and 1 husband. And now, the one I recovered a loan in. I want to take it out of the trust, I said. Carla nodded. Do you have a new plan for the property? I'm selling. She paused. Are you sure? Yes. The word came out easier than I expected. Once it's in your name, you'll be free to do whatever you like. Sell, transfer, rent. Exactly. She made a note. Would you like to list Samantha as your financial contact in case of emergency? I looked out the window. A mother and teenage daughter crossed the street, hand in hand. Yes, I said. List her for everything. We spent the next hour going through signatures. By the end, my hand ached, but I felt stronger than I had in years. Carla walked me to the door. You know, she said gently, a lot of clients your age get scared when they take these steps. You're not. I've been scared before, I said. Didn't get me much. She smiled. If you need help with the realtor referrals, I have a lawyer. We're already moving. She blinked, impressed. Well then, Mrs. Johnson, good luck. Thank you. Outside, the sun was sharp, clean. My car looked older than usual, but I didn't care. It would get me home. For now. Back home, I made tea and opened my notebook again. At the top of the next page, I wrote, "To do before closing. Get second appraisal. Contact Samantha about help packing. Send forwarding address to Doris. Bake one last pie for the porch swing." Goodbye, I underlined that last one. Because it wasn't sadness I felt now. Not anymore. It was resolve. And maybe, just maybe, a tiny edge of excitement. Francis Whitmore still used a fountain pen. He was the kind of lawyer who kept things in hard copy, who wore vests even in summer, and who remembered your children's names long after you'd forgotten his receptionists. When I walked into his office, he stood up slowly, knees clearly older now, and smiled like we were just picking up where we left off. "Mary," he said, gesturing to the worn leather chair across from his desk. "I was beginning to think I'd only see you again in probate court." "Let's keep it that way," I replied, settling into the seat. He pulled out the manila file I'd sent over last week, the one with all the amendments, requests, and instructions. "You've been busy." "I've been honest," I said. He nodded thoughtfully. "That's always the hardest part." He read through the notes again, even though we'd discussed them by phone. Angela and David, removed as power of attorney. House, to be sold. Will, restructured, with Samantha as sole heir. Healthcare directive, updated to remove family input. You understand this means that, legally, your children have no decision-making authority going forward? I do. And that this may affect your relationship with them. Permanently? I met his eyes. There hasn't been a relationship, only transactions. Francis put down his pen and folded his hands. You don't need my approval, Mary, but for what it's worth, I've seen a lot of people do this in anger. You're not angry. No, I said quietly. I'm finally done waiting to be loved properly. We signed the documents one by one. Some needed initials. Some required notary witnesses. He took care of the details while I sipped the coffee his secretary brought in without asking. It was strange, how official it all felt, like ending a business contract instead of stepping back from your own children. But then again, they'd made it a business, hadn't they? After the final signature, Francis stood again and shook my hand. I'll file everything with the county this week. You'll get certified copies in the mail. Thank you. He walked me to the door, pausing before I stepped outside. You know, he said, adjusting his glasses, your husband always used to say you were the heart of the family. I looked out at the parking lot. Then I suppose the body just kept going after the heart stopped. He didn't answer that. He didn't need to. The sun had slipped behind the building by the time I got home. I sat on the porch and watched shadows stretch across the street like long arms reaching for something they'd already lost. Inside, I made a list of what to pack first. The tea set from my mother. The quilt Samantha had stitched for my 75th birthday. The old photo albums. Not for Angela and David, but for me. So I wouldn't forget the parts that were good before they went wrong. That night, I slept better than I had since the hospital. Not because things were fixed, but because, for once, they were finally mine to live with, and mine to change. It was Angela who came first. I saw her car pull up around 3 in the afternoon, shiny, silver, the same one I'd co-signed for 3 years ago. She parked crooked, like she was in a hurry or didn't care. She didn't come to the door right away. I watched from the kitchen window as she sat behind the wheel, staring straight ahead, hands still on the steering wheel. Then, with a jerk, she got out, slammed the door harder than necessary, and marched up the steps like she owned the place. The knock was sharp, businesslike. I opened the door slowly. She looked thinner than I remembered. Too much contouring around her cheekbones. Clothes a little too sharp. Too expensive for someone who'd been struggling financially the last time she asked me for money. "Can I come in?" she said, without a greeting. "You're here already," I replied, stepping aside. She walked in like it wasn't the first time she'd rehearsed this scene. Stood in the middle of the living room, looked around like she was scanning for proof that the place had changed, that I'd done something unforgivable. "I just spoke to David," she said. "He told me everything." "I'm sure he did." "You changed the will?" "Yes." "You're selling the house?" "I am." "To do what, Mom? Move into a retirement condo and die alone out of spite?" I didn't flinch. I looked her in the eyes. "To live the years I have left on my own terms." Angela's mouth twisted, but she didn't respond right away. "This isn't you," she said finally. "You're not cruel. Refusing to keep paying for people who leave me alone in a hospital bed isn't cruel," I said. "It's just finally seeing things clearly. We had jobs, Mom, families. We were busy." "I've been busy since I was 22, I said, my voice calm. "Didn't stop me from taking care of everyone. You just chose not to show up." She folded her arms. "So this is revenge? This is boundaries. After all we've been through." "What exactly have we been through, Angela?" I asked. "Me covering your bills, co-signing your loans, babysitting without a thank you? That's not a relationship. That's a ledger." She opened her mouth, closed it again. The flush in her cheeks was rising. "You're being unfair," she said, quieter now. "We made mistakes. But this is permanent." I nodded. "That's the point. You're cutting off your children. I'm removing people who treated me like an obligation, or worse, an opportunity." She stared at me. Her mouth trembled for a second, then firmed. "You'll regret this," she said. "I already regret the decades I spent waiting for love that only came when someone needed something." Angela didn't slam the door when she left. She closed it with care. An hour later, David showed up. He didn't even knock. Just walked in like nothing had changed. I was still in the kitchen, rinsing dishes. "So it's true," he said from the doorway. "You're really doing this?" I turned to face him. "You've already heard it from Angela. Why come yourself?" He stepped forward. "Because I wanted to see if there was still a way to fix it. There isn't." "Mom, come on," he said, running a hand through his hair. "We were wrong, okay? I was wrong. I should have been there, I get it. But don't throw away everything." "You threw it away," I said. "I just stopped pretending it was still here." He sighed, deep and dramatic. "What about the kids? Don't they deserve something?" "Samantha is getting something," I said. "She earned it." His eyebrows jumped. "You're rewarding her for being, what? Nice?" "For being present. For treating me like a person." "This is so dramatic." "No," I said. "You just don't recognize boundaries when they aren't convenient for you." He looked around the house like it had betrayed him too. "Where will you go?" "Someplace quiet, smaller, mine." He hesitated, then added bitterly, "You're choosing her over your own son." "I'm choosing peace over noise." David stared at me for a long time. I don't know what he saw. Maybe someone he hadn't really looked at in years. Maybe just a source of income, finally running dry. He didn't say goodbye either. He just left. And I stood in the silence, letting it wrap around me. Not as punishment, but as proof. They had come. They had raged. They had threatened. And they had left, just like before. But this time, I hadn't broken. I had simply closed the door. The next morning, the house was quieter than ever. No calls, no knocks, just the hum of the refrigerator and the rustle of trees outside the window. But unlike before, the quiet didn't feel like abandonment. It felt earned. I made my tea slowly, hands steady, breath even. My body still ached from the surgery. Sharp reminders if I reached too far or turned too fast. But I moved differently now. Less like someone hoping not to be noticed, more like someone reclaiming her space. I sat at the table with a pad and pen, drew a line down the middle. Left side, what I gave. Right side, what I received. I didn't write money figures. I knew those by heart. I wrote time. I wrote kindness. I wrote trust. And I wrote silence. The right side stayed mostly blank. I didn't cry. Not anymore. That part of me had emptied itself out in quiet hospital rooms and dark kitchens years ago. By noon, Samantha texted, "You okay?" I replied, "I am. Want to come help me sort the attic this weekend?" She sent a heart. "Absolutely." I smiled. Later that afternoon, I started organizing drawers. Pulling out old receipts, clothes I hadn't worn in a decade, cards from people I couldn't remember. It wasn't sadness driving me. It was preparation. The kind of quiet purge a woman makes when she's no longer waiting to be seen. In the bottom drawer of the secretary desk, I found something unexpected. A postcard from George, sent 35 years ago when he'd gone on a fishing trip with his brother. "Miss you and the kids. House must be too quiet without me. Don't let them eat cereal for dinner. Love you. G." I smiled, held it to my chest for a moment. The handwriting was smudged in one corner. I must have spilled something once. George had been steady. Never perfect, but always there. And after he died, I carried the family like he'd trusted me to. Too long, maybe. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I didn't tense the way I used to. When I opened it, it was Doris. She had a pie plate covered in foil and a wary look in her eyes. "Cherry," she said. "Not as good as yours, but I figured you could use a break." I stepped aside. "Come in." "I've got coffee." She looked around the house like she was scanning for emotional debris. "Angela called me," she said, once we were seated. "I'm sure she did. She said you'd lost it." I raised an eyebrow. "Did I?" Doris smiled. "I told her no. I told her you'd finally found it." We ate pie in comfortable silence. "She'll come back," Doris said eventually. "So will David, when they need something." "I know," I said. "Will you let them in?" I thought for a long time before answering. "I'll open the door, but I won't open my wallet or my heart. Not unless they learn how to knock like they mean it." Doris nodded, satisfied. As she left, she looked back from the porch. "You know," she said, "some women your age take up gardening. You started a revolution." I laughed, and for once, it wasn't bitter. It was bright. After she left, I wrote one more thing in my notebook. Peace isn't quiet. It's choosing silence over begging. And I underlined it twice. I sold the house in less than 2 weeks. A young couple bought it, newly married, expecting their first child. They walked through the rooms like pilgrims, pointing at where the crib would go, where to put a table, what to do with the garden. I watched them from the kitchen, saying nothing. They didn't ask why I was leaving. Maybe they assumed I was downsizing, or heading to a facility, or moving closer to family. I let them believe whatever made them comfortable. I had no interest in explaining anything anymore. The closing happened on a Thursday morning. Carla was there, the realtor, a notary, everyone polite, brisk, efficient. I signed the last page, slid the pen across the table and said, "That's the last time I put my name where someone else will take it for granted." Carla gave me a quiet look, half admiration, half something heavier. I walked out with one folder, one bag, and one key. to a small, sunlit two-bedroom apartment near the edge of town. Quiet neighborhood. A balcony that caught the morning light. Enough space for books, pie dishes, and solitude. It was perfect. The movers came the next day. Samantha was there too, in sweatpants and a ponytail, hauling boxes like she'd done it her whole life. She didn't talk much, just smiled when I handed her water, joked about how much fabric I owned, and helped me set up the new curtains before nightfall. When everything was inside, she stood at the doorway and looked around. "It feels like you," she said. "It does." "You nervous?" "No, just ready." She hugged me then, not out of pity or obligation, but out of something stronger, something real. I held her tighter than I meant to, and she didn't pull away. That night, I slept without earplugs. No creaking stairs, no ghosts in the hallway, no wondering if someone might finally show up. They wouldn't. And that was okay now. The next morning, I woke early and walked to the bakery 2 blocks down, bought 1 croissant, black coffee, sat at the corner table by the window and watched people pass. No one knew who I was. No one asked about Angela or David or George. I liked it that way. Back home, I unpacked slowly. 1 photo of George on the nightstand, 1 quilt across the sofa. I left the rest in boxes, not forgotten, just unnecessary now. I called the electric company, the insurance, the pension office. Each time, they asked if I needed to list emergency contacts. I gave 1 name, just 1. That afternoon, I took the last item from the old house out of my bag, a small ceramic bird that used to sit in the kitchen windowsill next to the basil. George had given it to me on our 12th anniversary. A quiet thing, easily missed. I placed it on the new sill, watched it catch the light. I didn't cry. Not for the house, not for the family who never called again, not even for the version of myself who'd waited decades for a thank you that never came. Instead, I opened the window, let the breeze in, and started baking. I baked a pie on Sunday. Peach, like always. Not for anyone's birthday, not for a gathering. Just because the peaches were ripe, and the kitchen smelled empty without something in the oven. As it baked, I stood on the balcony with my tea. The wind moved through the trees with that soft hush I used to hear from the garden at the old house. The sound that reminded me nothing lasts. Not the good, not the bad. But some things return if you make space for them. Peace, for one. The pie was done just after noon. I let it cool on the rack and thought about the first time I ever baked one. I was 19. George had found a recipe in his mother's old book, and we made it together in a kitchen the size of a closet. We'd burned the first one, laughed so hard we forgot to be disappointed. That was the kind of love I'd tried to give. Simple, reliable, a little sweet even when the crust cracked. I took 2 slices from this one, packed them carefully in small containers, and walked down the hall to Doris's apartment. She'd moved into the same complex 2 weeks after me, claiming it was time for a change, though I knew better. She didn't want me doing this last stretch alone. She opened the door before I knocked. "Smells like you've forgiven the world," she said, taking the pie. "I just decided it doesn't owe me anymore." We ate in her little living room, surrounded by crocheted pillows and photos of nieces and nephews who did call, who did visit. I used to envy that. Now I just appreciated the difference. "You seen them?" she asked softly. I knew who she meant. "No," I said, "and I don't expect to." "You want to?" I thought for a moment. Not really. I think I wanted them to show up so I could forgive them. But then I realized I didn't need their apology. I just needed to stop apologizing to myself for loving them more than they loved me back. Doris nodded. That's a clean kind of truth. That night, Samantha called. She told me about her classes, a book she was reading, a friend she'd had an argument with. I let her talk. She asked how I was too, not just, how's your day, but the kind of how that means. Are you holding up? Do you feel seen? I'm good, I told her. I'm home now. We didn't say, I love you. We didn't have to. Some things were obvious. After we hung up, I wrote in my notebook one last time. It's not too late to stop waiting. Not too late to start over. Not too late to choose yourself. And then I added, it's not selfish to expect kindness. The next morning, I sat on the bench outside the bakery with a new book, a thermos of tea, and no plans. A girl walked past with her grandmother. Gray hair twisted up, floral blouse, canvas shoes. They laughed about something. I didn't hear the words, but I saw the bond. I hoped the girl remembered it someday. I hoped she didn't wait until it was too late to ask her grandmother how she was. Really was. And if you've read this far, maybe now's the moment to do the same. Call her, text her, knock on her door. Not because you need something, but because she's still there. And you still can.